You're listening to Psych with Mike, and the most important way to support the show is to find us on YouTube and hit that subscribe button. So no matter how you listen to Psych with Mike, find us on YouTube, smash the subscribe button, and we really appreciate it. Now, here's Psych with Mike. Welcome into the Psych with Mike and Brett Library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan.
And I'm Brett Newcomb, and I have an agenda.
I heard a little birdie told me before you start your agenda that you have a new book out.
Yes, and it's one of my agendas. I have multiple agendas.
So,
yes.
Psych with Mike and Brett is now a book, and you can get that on the Kendall Hunt website, on Amazon, or on Barnes & Noble, and the links for that will be in the description. Pick one up.
Right.
Read it. Let us know what you think.
Let us know what you think, hopefully. That's our agenda. What's yours?
Well, I want to hear more about the agenda that you have.
So, over the years, doing therapy and doing consulting, I have been invited to give a lot of talks for companies and schools and organizations, universities, what have you. And a number of those talks revolved around dealing with difficult situations, dealing with difficult people. And how do you, when you encounter a situation that becomes tainted with difficulty, how do you get your way through it and successfully? And remembering that the goal in all those situations universally is survive without loss of face and, if possible, gain points. So no matter where you are, no matter where you are on the totem pole, I can be the boss of an organization, I can be the lowest employee or member in terms of seniority and authority and power. If I'm called to a meeting, then I want to get through that meeting without getting fired, getting reduced in status in some way. Oh, we're taking your private office and we're putting you out in the bullpen because things have changed, circumstances are different. Not because you've done anything wrong, but I don't want that kind of negative attention to come to me or negative attention in any other domain. So sometimes I want to hide in plain sight. Sometimes I want to achieve status points and increase my status because of my performance or my existence. So that led me to thinking about agendas as an ingredient for being in meetings. Everybody has meetings that they have to go to. Maybe you're going to church and you're on a committee and the committee's having a meeting. We're going to figure out how to do the Halloween celebration this year for the kids at church. And you go to the meeting. Somebody in that meeting is in charge.
Right.
And a lot of peons are sitting there looking at each other saying, well, why are we here? What's going on? And different people have different things they want to accomplish. And so they have agendas. So my recommendation, my reality, is that whenever I go to a meeting, I stop and ask myself, going into the meeting, whether it's a meeting at church or whether it's a meeting at corporate headquarters to talk about doing a presentation or about a problem that they're having that they want me to help them resolve with whatever, is what's my agenda?
Right.
In this meeting, if I am successful when I come out of this meeting, what needs to happen for me? So I try to do that consciously and cognitively for every meeting that I go to. And very often the answer is just be in the meeting and don't draw any attention. Don't draw any negative fire.
So I think that a lot of people probably would be thinking to themselves right now, but Mr. Brett, you guys usually do these clinical presentations, and obviously clients have agendas.
Right.
So what's the difference between going into a therapy session and the client's agenda and what we're talking about?
Well, in the therapy session, the client and I both have agendas. My agenda is to facilitate the discovery and understanding of whatever the agenda is that the client has. And the client's coming, again, for different reasons. Maybe they're coming because their boss said, if you don't go to therapy, you're going to be fired. Maybe they're coming because their wife said, if you don't go to therapy, you're going to be divorced. Or you're going to be sleeping in the other room. But they have an agenda. Maybe their agenda is they're in pain and they know something is distorted and not working and they want help figuring out what it is and what to do about it. My agenda is to discover that, bring it into focus, and then see if I can be helpful.
So what I'm hearing from that is that when we're doing therapy, our agenda is the client's agenda.
I think it needs to be.
But when we're doing meetings or we're working with other people, working with the public, working with people that we're consulting with, whatever, then we don't have to be attentive to those agendas. And in some cases, we need to actually be aware of them and maybe even defend ourselves against them. Is that fair?
again, it comes back to I have my agenda in the meeting. It is to not lose status or face, not get in the negative light of attention, and if possible, to survive that meeting by gaining points. So if I'm hired by a company to accomplish some agenda of the company's, and I go in to try to do that, I'm aware that the audience may not want to be there, be interested in being there, be open to whatever I'm going to comment on or try to maneuver. And I have to dance through those raindrops and come out the other side with my perception or the company's perception that I've done the job they hired me to do.
And so we've all done presentations on difficult people. We've written whole curriculums on dealing with difficult people.
Difficult students, difficult parents. We've done a lot of work in school districts for teachers.
Difficult adolescents.
Yeah.
I mean, so the first thing that occurs to me is, how do I know the difference between my own sense of egocentrism, so my own perception, not being able to get out of that, and the idea that somebody's being difficult? How do I know that? How do I know that that person's difficult and it's not just me?
Okay, so sometimes people in a setting don't know what their agenda is. They don't even know that they have one. I remember working with a number of adolescent males who were just generically furious about life. And they weren't doing well in school. They had run-ins with the law. They had problems here and there, relationships falling apart, what have you. And they would come in with an attitude, and they were angry, and they didn't want to be there, and I don't know why. And if I could reach them and get them to become self-reflective and a little more self-aware, what often was at the bottom of their issue was anger at their parents because their parents were screwing up in some way, at least in their perception. And they were trying to force their parents to have to come to grips with whether or not they were getting a divorce, or how they were managing money, or how they were setting rules in the household, or what have you. And the only way that they knew to do that was act out, misbehave, and call negative attention to the family, so that the family had to come together and try to embrace it. And so then you negotiate with the family, and you get the parents in. Sometimes they'll come in, sometimes they won't. And you talk to them about, okay, this is what's going on. He's really mad at you because you don't have your act together. And then the parents have a meltdown. He's a kid. What does he know? He doesn't have. And maybe there is a complete lack of information within the family about what's really going on. If his dad is being a jerk every day when he comes home because he's afraid of losing his job, or because he's not making enough money to pay the bills, or because his mother is sick and going to the hospital and they don't have insurance and costs are exponentially going to hit him, and he's worried about that, but he's got 3 kids at home he has to be. I mean, dads don't necessarily tell kids, I'm having struggle here. I'm in a bad place, and I may not have the energy for you or the room for you right now to give you the attention that you need. And so some of our job then, our agenda, begins to be, how do we help them communicate better and reach a better understanding for all the players? And what's your role, and how can you help as opposed to detract from the survival of your family and your relationship?
So when you would go into meetings, and I can attest to this because I remember you telling me this.
You've been a few meetings.
Over and over again, you would always say to me when we first were working at West County that any meeting that you went into, you considered your meeting.
Yeah.
And at the time, I will admit, I didn't really understand what that meant. And the way that I understood that was different than the way that you're explaining it now, which is that you had an agenda to be able to care for yourself. I heard it as, okay, I'm going to go in and everybody's going to know that I'm the guy in charge, no matter who, no matter what the presentation is. But that isn't exactly what you're saying. You're just saying that your agenda, when you go into the meeting, your ownership of that is that you're going to make sure that you don't lose status. But there are times when you do have to then open up and present yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The owner of the business, the director of the business, had her agenda, or how do we grow the business, how do we get more business consulting, how do we get more clients for therapy, how do we do good therapy. My role in the company was to be the clinical director.
Right.
So I was to try to help the therapist who are having issues with clients, or are saying, well, what are the boundaries here, and can I see my sister's next door neighbor as a client, to help work through the clinical issues, boundaries, appropriateness for that as it applied to the meeting. But Dr. Fitzgibbons thought my job was to promote whatever her agenda was.
Yeah.
And sometimes my agenda was to just sit quietly and let her do what she wanted to do. Sometimes it was to support what she wanted to do. And sometimes it was to put a fly in the ointment and say, I don't think that's going to work, and here's why. So I had to be prepared to do any of those things. So one of the things you need to remember, too, is everybody has an agenda.
Right.
They may not know what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, often it's a disguised purpose. It's
Right.
hidden meaning. And so then you have to make the effort to find out. Sometimes their agenda, which being passive-aggressive for most of my younger life, sometimes the agenda was to prevent you from achieving your agenda. So I go to a meeting, I want to sit down and figure out what the hell you want done, and then see if I can stop that. Distract you, interrupt you. When I was teaching high school, the kids learn very quickly. If we're talking about, okay, there's going to be a semester exam this Friday, we need to review today and tomorrow. And then they're going to ask questions about, hey, did you know the baseball season opened?
Right.
And, oh, I heard you had a new dog. And what kind of dog is it? And did you get a new car? I saw you were driving this weekend. You got a different car. So if they can distract you into talking about things that you didn't prepare to talk about, then the hour goes by and you didn't review the material.
And then,
so then on Friday they say, well, you didn't review. We can't have a test today.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's on you because you didn't do a good job.
Right. One of the places that I experienced this the most intensely was when the priest scandal broke in the 1990s.
Yeah.
We were a part of the
Protecting God's
group
Children.
that developed the presentations that the St. Louis Archdiocese presented to parishioners, and it was called Protecting God's Children. And we would go out and we would do these. Initially, they were being done by professionals, and you and I did
We're
bunches of
professionals.
those. Yeah, no. Eventually, they got lay people to do it
I
because
see.
they didn't want to pay us anymore. But
Right.
but in the beginning, we were going out and we were doing it. And I was at a church locally. I won't say the name of the church, but and there was a guy in there, and it was very common for people to be upset and angry. They would be upset that they had to go through this training because it was difficult material. People didn't want to be exposed to it. It made them feel a certain way. They were angry because they were there and the priest wasn't there, and this was all about the priest and how come the priests aren't here. They were angry for any number of reasons, and we would be easy targets for them to kind of vent that frustration. So I was at this church, and I was doing a Protecting God's Children. There were probably about 75 people in the room, and this one guy just was just beefing on me, and he just wouldn't let it go. And it turns out that the priest of the diocese was there and came up and grabbed this guy by the ear and led him out of the room, and people stood up and clapped because the priest had intervened. Now,
oh, wow.
I'm not saying that that's the right thing to do. What I'm saying is that sometimes these things happen, and so when you are faced with a situation where you are the target of the agenda of a very difficult person, what do you think is the best way for an individual to respond to that?
Am I leading the meeting or am I just a member of the meeting?
Let's say you're leading.
Okay, if I'm leading the member, then I have to take charge of the meeting.
Yeah.
And I have to find a way to put a box around whoever that is trying to be disruptive. And that's an important point to acknowledge. Sometimes when you go into a situation with difficult people, you have to try to figure out what in the hell are they after here?
Right.
What is their agenda? What are they trying to do? Sometimes they're trying to get out of paying for services or meeting their obligation. I don't want to have to do this.
Exactly, which is your point about the kids and the test.
Right. Sometimes they're looking for something to get lucky about. Like if you do the wrong thing, I can sue you, or I can ask for my money back, or I can do something else. And so they want that. Sometimes it's displaced anger. I'm angry because I have to sit here after I've worked all day, but because in the circumstance you're talking about, the Protecting God's Children presentation, everybody that had anything to do with kids' activities in the Catholic Church had to attend and had to have a certification that they had attended.
Right.
So you get these guys who are working all kinds of jobs who come in after they've worked all day and they have to sit for an hour and a half and listen to this presentation about things they don't think have anything to do with them.
Exactly.
But it comes down to, we were saying things like, do not be left alone
Mm-hmm.
with children. Make sure there's at least one other adult there. So if you're staying after practice for moms and dads to come and pick up their kids, you have to make sure somebody stays with you so that you're not alone with
Right.
one child for any period of time where there's no visible accountability.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would get really offended. Are you
Right.
telling me that I'm suspected of child abuse, I'm going to molest a child? No. What we're telling you is you have to behave in a way that makes you safe.
Mm-hmm.
Because if questions get asked, if situations come up, fingers get pointed, and you might get slimed.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we're doing is say, protect yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Know what's going on here. We talk to so many of those coaches, especially of little children playing soccer or baseball or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
They say, take kids on or off the playing field, they'd pat them on the butt.
Exactly.
And we say,
Yep.
don't do that.
Right.
And they were like, oh my God, you think I'm molesting this child? No.
No,
I'm
you're
not
making it
saying
harder for
at
that
all.
child to know when they are being molested.
What is appropriate touch
Right.
and who is appropriate to touch. But also, it's not necessary.
Mm-hmm.
You can cheer for them, you can encourage them, you can praise them without touching their butt.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a whole new worldview for them. They were really offended.
Mm-hmm.
So my agenda was to get through that meeting without having that whole place melt down over
Yeah.
those issues.
Right.
So however I could do that is how I would attempt to do it. Sometimes, and another agenda item, is their unwillingness to accept the realities of their situation,
Mm-hmm.
their age, or their condition.
Mm-hmm.
So again, dealing with adolescents, you've got teenagers that are acting out. I would say to them, you can't fix your broken family.
Right.
So acting out and getting yourself in trouble, getting kicked out of school, getting arrested for shoplifting, whatever it is not going to make your family
Mm-hmm.
behave. So our job, yours and mine, is to help you survive until the point that you can become independent and pursue your own life.
Mm-hmm.
So will you work with me on moving forward in a positive and progressive way, or are you just going to keep spitting in the pool?
Mm-hmm.
And if you keep spitting in the pool, things are not going to improve for the better. They're going to get worse, and it's going to get more serious, and prices are going to get higher,
Mm-hmm.
and we still have the same mountain to climb, but now we're lower down on it. And very often, they would respond.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would start saying, okay, how can you get grades better and get into college, or how can you clean up your legal situation so you can go in the Army, or whatever you need to do, or get a job, be employable, keep a job. We can do this.
I think that a lot of times that people mistakenly think or assume that the goal is to change the individual's agenda, and that's not it at all. The goal is to make people feel heard and seen. You don't have to necessarily cause them to alter their agenda or the way that they think. You just have to make them feel like they've been heard and seen. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, because they resonate when there's an accurate reflection, and we call it in therapy, we call it accurate reflective listening. When I hear you and reflect back to you that I have heard you and you feel heard, there's a resolution for you of confusion and intensity and anger. It gets quieter inside. Then you're more open. You have a safer place to stand to look at. So now that we've identified this, which direction can we go? Which direction should we go? There's still options. We can do different things here. But let's find out what they are, and let's see which one you want to invest in.
This is a story that I tell in the book, but I had this young man. He was in his 20s. He wasn't an adolescent, but he was in his 20s. And he had had a really, really violent, aggressive father. And so when I was talking to him about that, you know, my reflective listening, my reflection back to him
Right.
was, wow, you know, that must have been really scary growing up that way. And he was like, yeah, it was really scary, but he would go on and everything. And I kind of felt like, okay, I didn't really hit the mark there.
Right.
And so then he would get really, really ramped up. And I found myself feeling angry. And so the next time when I reflected back, I said, you know, it was probably really scary, but I wonder if you were also really angry. And he started crying.
Right.
And so when you hit that button
Yeah.
and make people feel seen and heard, you won't have to worry or wonder, did I do a good job? You'll know.
So, talking about agendas, as we leave this conversation, I'd like to remind people that everybody has an agenda. They may not know what it is. They may know part of it, if not all of it, and pursue it, but without skill. If you're the person that's in that environment and that is happening and incoming rounds are coming at you because of other people's agendas, we don't want you to respond with a powerful aggression. We want you to respond with balance and good boundaries and the ability to say, I'm sorry, this is not working for me. Can we change the tone of the conversation? There are things to do like content to process shift, where we're arguing about facts. And I say, facts don't matter here. What matters are the feelings. Let's step back and talk about the process of how we bring this to the table and how we negotiate it. If I can get you to do that, then I've successfully disrupted the rage so that there's a breathing moment to say, what else is going on?
And one thing that I always educate clients to do, I'd ask you if you agree with this, is that the louder the other person is, the quieter you should be. It's really difficult for people to continue to ramp themselves up when they're faced with this alternative kind of behavioral body language.
If you're able to be balanced and not afraid by being quiet, quietly assertive, yes, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Sometimes, though, you have to be louder to get attention, to disrupt the flow. Like if you've got a 3-year-old who's screaming his head off, sometimes you need to make a louder noise. We were trained working with young children. That starts to happen. Make a noise at the level of the child and gradually bring it down. Like when they're and drop it down. They'll often quiet down. So generically, I would agree with you. Don't muscle up.
Yeah.
Don't say I'm bigger than you or I'm tougher than you or you can't hurt me. I'll break your nose. Don't go there. But step back and say, content to process shift. We're getting lost in a lot of verbiage here that's negative, and I'm losing sight of what we're trying to accomplish.
Right. And you can even agree with the person in part. You can agree with the idea. You can agree with what the principle of what they're stating, and say, but what are we? Yeah, exactly. What are we going to do about it? Or is there a different way to approach? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
How do we get out of here? So we shut it down.
So hopefully that is beneficial for people. As we have said, we have a book out. We would love for you to pick that up. There'll be links below that you can check that book out. The music that appears in Psych with Mike and Brett is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. And if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike and Brett.